Hey guys, this video is for my buddy Milo's Garage. He said he'd like to see me sweating some copper pipe together. A lot of you guys already know how to do this, but he said he'd like to see it, so I'm going to make a video for him, just kind of outlining what's going on with it. I normally use an oxyacetylene rig, a small one, but for this I'm just going to use my little MAP gas torch. Since this is only ½ inch, it's some scrap that I had available. I'm going to sweat it together just to show him how this goes. One thing that's real important about copper is that you have to get it clean or it's not going to solder well. This is oxidized where it's laid on the shelf amongst some other scrap pieces, I don't know, for 4 or 5 months maybe. And you can see over time what happens. When you first get it, it's about this color, and then as it oxidizes, it gets this dull finish to it. You have to sand that off either with sandpaper or steel wool or something of that nature. They also make little cleaning brushes that you can get at the hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, places like that, that's got little tiny wires in it, and you actually stick this over the end of the pipe and twist it. Well, what happens, unfortunately, is over time the brushes wear down and they get to where they really don't do that good of a job anymore. You can kind of help supplement that by sticking a piece of sandpaper around your pipe and then sliding this down over it. That just kind of prolongs its life a little bit, but over time those brushes get bent and they really don't clean that well, so I'm not really that fond of them. For the cost of what that one cost, you can buy 4 or 5 pieces of sandpaper and do a bunch of soldering with it. So, with another thing too, your fittings, even from the store, if they're brand new, you still want to sand those inside and out to make sure you get most of that corrosion and stuff off. We're going to use flux as a cleaning agent, but the more of this stuff that you can sand off physically, the less the flux has to do and the better your solder joint's going to be. So let me set you down here, hopefully to where you can see what's going on. I don't have my tripod with me. I've kind of fabricated up something, but this will kind of have you focused on the vise. I'm going to put these pipes in there and I'll start getting everything fitted up. You definitely want to use like an acid brush. Just a very minimal coat of flux is really all you need, just a light coating to make sure you got the metal surfaces covered. Any excess that you put on there will just squish out, and you can take your brush and wipe it off. Make sure I'm getting in front of the camera there. It's kind of hard to see. And I'll brush that excess off. Had to remember how I had this set up. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. Any excess flux that's on here is not going to hurt anything. It will end up burning off or melting and running out as you solder everything together. So it's not a problem. It's actually better to have too much than not enough, because you get one shot at it, and if you don't get the flux down in there good, what's going to happen is it'll halfway solder and you'll have a pinhole and it'll leak, and then you'll have to try and get all that water back out of your lines to sweat it together again. And generally what happens once you put the water in there and test for leaks and this copper gets full of water, you can't heat it up enough to get that solder back loose, and you end up having to cut part of your pipe back off. Let's see. I think we'll do it like this. I'm going to tilt it a little bit of an angle so that make sure you're still in the frame there. Kind of a wedge here to sit you guys on. Sorry about that, I really wasn't prepared, but hopefully that's kind of got you seeing what's going on. There we go. So slide all this together. I always like to start from the bottom up on my joints, because what happens is heat travels up the pipe, and if you start on the top with your joints and work down, you have to put a lot more heat into the pipe itself. So I just force a habit, start at the bottom. One thing too that you have to know about all the solder that you get now is lead-free solder. if you happen to have some old solder laying around, anything potable water use, you have to have lead-free solder, so make sure that's what you're using, okay? I generally heat at the bottom of my joint and try to apply the solder to the upper side. So what happens is it actually draws it around the fitting. If you just put the solder right at the very top of it, where the heat is, it's just going to draw it in that one area. You really got to watch this. If you get too much heat in there, you liquefy the solder too much, and all it does is run out. Oh, didn't have my vise tight enough. About dropped it. There we go. Reheat that and make sure it didn't move, okay? Then, since you've already got that joint started, the top of it should take very minimal amount of heat to get the solder to travel down in it. You do want to watch and make sure that you get the joint full of solder. So what I'm doing here is just reheating it. I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but you'll see little bubbles, kind of like water bubbling out of it. And what that is, that's actually the flux cooking out of it, and the solder filling all the voids between the pipe and the fitting. I know it's kind of hard to see, but okay, now I've got that one done. I'm actually going to take the solder and do the top one again. I'm starting on the bottom one. These are a little more tricky, your vertical joints are. You have to make sure you're applying the heat pretty high up so that you're drawing the solder uphill. Those are the more difficult joints to master, and it does take a little bit of time. You will have some run down the pipe, but you're trying to use the heat to draw the solder up in there to wick it up in between the two. That's where it's critical about your heat control, applying it and then removing it just as the solder starts to flow, and then not heating it up too much as you finish the joint off. You see, it took just very little heat to pull this joint together. Cook it just a little bit to make sure I don't have any voids in there. Then we'll shut the torch off. And I like to let that set for just a minute, and you'll see the solder actually change colors from a real shiny color to a more dull silver. Once that does so, I've got a wet rag. I always like to take and gently wipe my joints while it's still hot, and that actually helps remove all that residual flux. All the stuff that I use says non-corrosive flux, but I still like to make sure to wipe it off so that way I don't have to worry about corrosion later on. And it just makes it look a lot nicer. I got a little happy with the solder on this one. You can kind of see where it run up underneath. Again, wiping it off with a wet cloth. You got to be careful with this too, because the steam can still get you even through the wet rag, so please be careful. This is just like anything else that we do with this stuff, you guys. Practice makes perfect. We've put in approximately 225 tub faucets here, so I've probably soldered more than my fair share of copper lines, and all of it was half-inch stuff. But we also do all the main plumbing here at the hotel, everything up to 3-inch copper. That's where the oxyacetylene rig comes in. Sometimes we have to use 2 of them to get the fittings and stuff hot, but it all boils back down to the same principles. Clean it, get the right amount of heat in it at the right area, apply your solder, and then get off of it, because the more you keep heating it and reheating it, all it does is just pull your solder back out. You can actually get it too hot to where the solder doesn't stick, so that's why it's critical that you watch as you're heating it and then try your solder to it to see just when it starts melting, you know you're about there, and you can kind of start pulling your torch away to control your heat level. That's another thing I like about this little MAP gas torch. It's real easy to control the heat. The the acetylene rig would have been a lot faster, but it's a little bit more tricky to master your heat control on it, depending on how hard you got your flame tip on it. This right here, all you got to do is just back your distance away from it. Makes it a lot easier. Well, I'm sure you guys are probably bored to death, particularly those of you that know how to plumb and have been doing this for years. Don't laugh too much at me. But there you go, Milo. Just for you, buddy. And I'll probably try to upload this evening. But there you go. Guaranteed not to leak. I guess because there's no water hooked to it. Well, you guys have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Take care. guys, this is a little video of the creek which runs down the backside of where I work. We've had quite a bit of rainfall the last couple of days, so it's up a little bit, and thought you guys might like to see it. The city during the spring, summer, and part of the fall actually stock it with trout. The fishing actually begins down at the far end of our property. Well, enough of that. If this doesn't put you to sleep, nothing will. I'll see you guys later.